shining from nowhere. Hanukkah light burns so bright, lifts my soul, raises my sights. Hanukkah light feels so right. 8 small flames shining through the night. The darkness starts to lift now, help is on its way. Hopelessness is starting to fade away. I lift my eyes to heaven, where my help is from. The light now from the flames shines for everyone. Hanukkah light burns so bright, lifts my soul, raises my sights. Hanukkah light feels so right. 8 small flames shining through the night. The light is piercing through the darkness, shining till forever. There's hope and love and brotherhood that's bringing us together. Open up your heart to make a brand new start. Hanukkah's the time to take part. Whoa, Hanukkah light burns so bright, lifts my soul, raises my sights. Hanukkah light feels so right. 8 small flames shining through the night.
One of the key phrases of our time is the clash of civilizations. And Chanukah is about one of the first great clashes of civilizations between the Greeks and Jews of antiquity, between Athens and Jerusalem. The ancient Greeks produced one of the most remarkable civilizations of all time. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, historians like Herodotus and Thucydides, dramatists like Sophocles and Aeschylus. They produced art and architecture of a beauty that has never been surpassed. Yet in the 2nd century before the Common Era, they were defeated by a group of Jewish fighters known as the Maccabees, and from then on, Greece, as a world power, went into rapid decline, while the tiny Jewish people survived every exile and every persecution, and are still alive and well today. What was the difference? The Greeks, who didn't believe in a single loving God, gave the world the concept of tragedy. We strive, we struggle, at times we achieve greatness, but life on this view has no ultimate purpose. The universe neither knows nor cares that we exist. Ancient Israel gave the world the idea of hope. We are here because God created us in love, and through love we discover the meaning and purpose of life. Tragic cultures eventually disintegrate and die. Lacking any sense of ultimate meaning, they lose the moral beliefs and habits on which continuity depends. They sacrifice happiness for pleasure. They sell the future for the sake of the present. They lose the passion and energy that brought them greatness in the first place. That's what happened to ancient Greece. Judaism and its culture of hope survived. And the Chanukah lights are the symbol of that survival, of Judaism's refusal to jettison its values for the glamour and prestige of a secular culture then or now. A candle of hope may seem a small thing, but on it, the very survival of a civilization may depend. Happy Chanukah, Chanukah Sameach.
We're standing here in the heart of the Jewish quarter, the central square of the Old City. In back of us is the HURVA synagogue, but right in front of us is a beautiful gold menorah, which was made by Machon HaMikdash, the Temple Institute, which is a really interesting place in the Old City that is created to teach people about the temple and also to prepare Kohanim for service eventually in the third temple. It should come soon in our days. This is not a model. It's actually built to specification. It's not solid gold, gold being a very soft metal. It has a solid metal core, but it's coated with, I believe, 40 kilograms of gold. So it's quite a valuable item meant to be used in the temple. And the shape of it, the whole way it's laid out, is not randomly picked. If you look at the Arch of Titus in Rome, which was an arch that was built around the year 80 to commemorate the victory of the Romans over the Jews with the destruction of the Second Temple and the fall of Jerusalem in the year 70, you can see on the inside of the arch there's a frieze. And you can see the Roman soldiers walking in a victory parade called the Triumph, and they're carrying the menorah, and it looks exactly like this one. And that, of course, commemorates a very dark time in Jewish history when we lost Jerusalem and the menorah went into captivity as booty for the Romans and the spoils. But going back to the story of Hanukkah, we understand why we're focusing on the menorah. If we look a little more deeply into what's going on, I always ask a question when I'm teaching this topic. You think about the whole story of Hanukkah, which, by the way, was much more, it's sort of written as a struggle for freedom against Greek occupation. That's really not true. Alexander the Great and the Greeks had conquered the Jews a century and a half before that. Hanukkah was really a religious, ideological war. And it was a long struggle. It wasn't one or two battles, it was multiple battles. Most of the Maccabean brothers were killed in battle. So it was a long, drawn-out military struggle, but it wasn't about so much physical control, but it was an ideological struggle. Because if you think about it, what was a bigger victory? That we, the teeny tiny Jewish people, fighting a great superpower, were able to beat them, albeit in a protracted struggle? Or that a menorah, a lamp, burns in the temple for 8 days? Clearly, more impressive is the military victory. But when we look at what the menorah symbolizes, which is the temple, which is the spirituality of the heart of the Jewish people, light, we understand Hanukkah was ultimately an ideological struggle between the Greek worldview and the Jewish worldview. The Greeks had a very different way of looking at the world than we did, and what they were trying to snuff out was not the Jewish people, but Judaism. It was history's first religious ideological war. And we always connect Torah with light. And what the Greeks were going after was that light, to snuff it out. And their view was diametrically opposed to ours. I've heard it summarized beautifully that to the Greeks, what was beautiful was holy, but to the Jewish people, what was holy was beautiful. And holy is connected to our relationship with God and Torah, those principles and ideas that were given to us at Mount Sinai, and that we carried literally for many, many, many centuries as being history's only monotheistic faith. And Hanukkah was ultimately that conflict on an ideological level between diametrically opposed worldviews. Ultimately, we triumphed. Jewish wisdom triumphed. The Torah survived. The Jewish people survived. And that's why the symbol is the menorah, because it's truly a spiritual victory, a victory of light and ideas over the darkness, which was Greek worldview, which tried to snuff those out.
As Ken beautifully explained while standing in front of the magnificent golden sever-branch menorah, now present in the heart of the Old City, which Be'ezrat Hashem b'meirah b'yameinu we hope to be able to use very shortly in the next Beit HaMikdash, he explained how the menorah represents the message of the struggle of Chanukah, the ideological struggle between the values of the Greeks of physical beauty and that of spiritual holiness represented by Am Yisrael. The menorah, in fact, teaches us how we may synthesize between the two. The blessing that Noach gives to his son Yafet, Yafiyato shel Yafet bo'ohalo shel Shem. May the beauty of Yafet, of the Greeks, be incorporated in the houses in the Mikdash of Shem. May we be able to understand how through beauty we could also achieve Kedusha, looking at the magnificent menorah with the kaftorim and the prachim, the ornaments, that are in fact miksha achat, recognizing that as long as we incorporate it as a means to the ends of calling out in the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of representing the Ruach of Hashem, then we can ultimately triumph against our enemies and those conflicting values. And speaking of values, Chazal also tell us that the menorah represents wisdom. In Gemara Brachot Daf Chaf Hei Amud Aleph, we're told that if you see olive oil in a dream, anticipate the illumination of the light of Torah. Rabbi Yitzchak teaches us in Gemara Baba Batra Daf Chaf Chet Amud Bet, Hamachkim Yadrim, someone who wants to gain knowledge, she looks towards the Darom, the south, the place where the menorah stood. For after all, this is going to be the center of wisdom. And the antithesis, Chazal teach us that Yavan is represented by Choshech, by darkness, V'choshech al pnei tehom, because they wanted to obliterate and extinguish the light of Torah. They wanted to rid the manifestation of godly presence by introducing a different wisdom, a new culture, Greek philosophy and literature, science and art, sport and rhetoric. Wait a second, don't we acknowledge these values or knowledges as well? Don't we espouse the beauty and the brilliance of the natural world created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The menorah explains to us how we're supposed to incorporate all wisdoms as part of the wisdom of Torah. There were 7 branches, Chazal tell us, each one of these 7 branches symbolizing a different discipline of knowledge. But they were miksha achat, they were connected to the central branch of the candelabrum, known in fact as the menorah, the central ner. And not only were the branches connected, but el mul penei ha-menorah ya'iru shevat hanerot. All the other forms of wisdom faced the Torah, faced the central branch of the menorah, symbolizing the light and the knowledge of Torah, teaching us that all forms of wisdom may enhance, but certainly not replace the divine wisdom of Torah. All other disciplines may be integrated, but they remain secondary to the supreme light of Torah study, the center of the menorah. And in fact, Torah further illuminates all aspects of knowledge. This is the message that we take with us on Chanukah. Certainly after the passing of Rabbi Sacks, Zatzal, who taught us how to incorporate all different philosophies, arts and sciences, humanities, in the world of Torah study, and how through that we illuminate, we enhance our own appreciation of Torah values and then share it with the rest of the world. Rav Shesha teaches us that the light of the menorah wasn't necessary for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's the source of light, but rather, Eduti leba'ei olam shechina shora b'Yisrael. It was testimony to the entire world that the wisdom and the Shechina rests within Am Yisrael, that Torah is really the center, the heart of it all. This is the message that we take with us this Chanukah. This is the message that we heard on Shabbat Chanukah through the Nebu'ah of Zechariah, Lo b'chayil v'lo b'koach, ki im v'ruchi amar Hashem tzvakot. That what really gives us strength is not the military, the spiritual. It's not going to be any other aspect of wisdom, rather the Ruach of Hashem, that central branch of the menorah, through which we illuminate our lives. Chanukah Sameach.
We are not only party chaverim and chaverot, we are good friends and all have a very personal relationship to us and to our families. And so I want to thank you today for your personal friendship. It certainly is very important and meaningful to me and to Edith. Thanks again. Let's stay good friends in our building as soon as we can get back there and keep the same relationship. What qualifies me to talk to you? I approach a century age. I was born in Germany, then moved to England before the war, and subsequently fate, together with a few thousand other refugees, was shipped by the British government, some to Canada, some to Australia, I went to Canada, was interned for a year and a half. Later on, attended university and stayed in Canada. When had a business, lived first in Montreal and for 65 years in Toronto until we made Aliyah 3-4 years ago. Long before you were born, I was in Germany when Hitler assumed the premiership. Was fortunate to escape from there before the Holocaust, before the Shoah. But I realized the unbelievable hardship of Galut that was faced by European Jewry. I remember too the great happiness that engulfed us all when unbelievably in 1947 a Jewish state was declared. I listened to the radio, I listened how one country after another, what was then the United Nations, were called up. America said yes, Russia said yes. It was one spot in history where Russia and the United States stayed together. Maybe it was for sure it was the impact of the Holocaust that made them recognize a Jewish state. Later on, I remember the events when Israel was started, when Arab states from around us tried to throttle the state of Israel. And it's an unbelievable part of Jewish history how after thousands of years we have a state. When you think of it all, and you were born before there was a state, when you think of it all in terms of history, this is history in the making in a very, very big way.